How's it going, y'all? I'm Nate Drolet, and welcome back to the Advanced Climbers series. Today we're doing the second half of the weakness episode, where I go through all my different points for advanced climbers about weaknesses and distill them all together. I'd initially recorded this as one giant episode, but ended up being a little bit long, so I decided to split it in half. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 82. Playing the long game with your weaknesses. Like I said earlier, if you haven't already addressed your weaknesses in this very short, focused way, do that. That's step one. But if you feel like you've already logged a lot of time into these big glaring weaknesses you have, and they still have plenty of room to go, I recommend playing a little bit more of a long game and maybe thinking a little more holistically about how we approach them. When you're an intermediate climber, or especially a beginner, working on your weakness, it's very transactional. It's like going to a vending machine. You just put in a little bit of time and effort, and out comes improvement. It's almost a one-to-one. It's really great. Now, if you're an intermediate climber at this moment and you hear that and you're like, doesn't feel like it, Nate, that's totally okay. In hindsight, it feels more that way, but in the moment, it might feel like you're doing a ton of work, and that's awesome, like you probably are. As we advance, and we've been climbing for a long time, and these stubborn weaknesses aren't going away quickly, it's no longer quite as transactional. It's not a vending machine, it's more like a garden. We have more things to tend to. We have to be patient. We just have to put in the time and know that rushing it's not going to get us anywhere. It's just going to take the time it's going to take. So let me go ahead and give you an example here. When it comes to trying to have a more holistic approach to improving a weakness, I think that we should be looking at mental, physical, technical, tactical, and strategic ways of improving it. Let's use big moves to crimps as an example, because it's kind of everyone's favorite weakness. Everyone's like, oh yeah, huge moves to bad holds. I find that difficult. It's like, yes, totally fair. Most of us do. But we'll use that as an example. So we'll start off with mental. First off, if you're jumping to a heinous little crimp, you need a lot of confidence. You need belief that you're actually going to latch it, which, if you have a lot of evidence from the past telling you you're not going to latch it, it's hard to overcome that. But what I have found is that even if we take this really hard climb, let's say it's a board climb, we will make it more vertical so it's less aggressive. Even still, there's this gap for a lot of people between what they can do and what they believe they can do. So learning how to cultivate a little bit of confidence goes a long way. Another thing that can show up mentally when trying to do these moves is, do you have a past injury history with this type of move? If jumping to crimps just feels scary to you, you're like, I don't want to get hurt. Yeah, that's something we need to address. First, we need to make sure, are you robust enough that you can do this? Second, we need some sort of graded exposure to this type of movement. So maybe instead of jumping wildly on a board, we can go over to a campus board, have your feet on the ground, grab one rung, and you can jump and latch a hold in control. We're going to be much more coordinated just jumping off of the ground. We can go a lot slower. We can go as far as we want or as close as we want for this type of move. But this can kind of build up a little bit of mental tolerance for these types of moves so that you start to have a little more faith in them, and you're not going to be scared that anytime you jump to a crimp, you're just going to get hurt. Another point on mental is your effort level. How hard are you trying? With this style, you need to try really hard to do big moves to small holds. People will often say, well, if you can't hold a hold, you can't do a move. And they'll grab a hold and they think, this just feels too bad. I must not be strong enough. And I don't love that phrase. I think there's a lot of flaws in it. But let's for a minute pretend that technique doesn't exist. Momentum doesn't exist. You don't have legs that you can drive through. And truly it is, you are statically campus locking off on these crimps to do this move. Zero technique, zero momentum, zero lower body. Okay, in this situation, the whole idea of if you're not strong enough to hold a hold, you can't do a move, it's pretty close to being right now. But I would say even still, it's not so much are you strong enough, but it is, are you hitting the minimum threshold of force through your fingers? So I'll just throw out a random number. Let's say you have to be able to put 70 pounds of force through this 15 mil crimp to do the move. Well, that might take 99% try hard to be able to hit that number. But if you pull on and you're kind of hesitant and you're like, I don't know, it doesn't feel that good, I'll just sort of try, and you give 50%, yeah, it's going to feel terrible. It'll feel like you cannot hold this hold because you are not hitting that minimum threshold of force. You have to try hard to do hard boulders. For a lot of people, if they wanted to get better at big moves to bad holds, we could literally stop at mental and just work on those things that I listed, and they will likely improve. But we're not looking for that. We're looking for a more well-rounded approach. So we have mental, next is physical. When it comes to big moves between bad holds, people's first port of call is always contact strength. I can get there, I just can't latch it. Okay. When it comes to doing big moves between bad holds, it is my opinion that contact strength, the ability to latch a hold really quickly, purely through the strength of your forearms, that is the icing on the cake. That is our last line of defense, keeping us from falling. There are so many other things that go into this that we should prioritize first. And don't get me wrong, when I say it's the icing on the cake, I don't know if you've ever had a cake without icing, they're terrible. Icing's important. We want contact strength. But if we're looking at the physical side, how's your full body strength? Are you launching yourself in the right direction? If we're going to blend in even technical a little bit here, how's your start position? How's your path of travel? Are you getting to the right end position? Are you physically strong enough through your shoulders, through your legs, through your midsection to be able to create some form of control into that end position? Are you following through the move to where when you go up, you're still continuing to pull even as your hand's latching that high hold? Or are you more like a bottle rocket where you create all this force, more or less go limp with the low arm and both feet, and you just pray to God that you're going to latch this hold? You're going to be in trouble if that's how you're doing it. There are so many aspects that go into sticking big moves to bad holds. Contact strength, absolutely trainable, and it is important to train. It is valuable to train at a certain point, but from what I've seen in my decade of coaching, it's normally where people like to go to first. I think that if you're building a foundation upon contact strength, you're going to be in for a rough time. One last thing on physical is that having strength in different grip positions can also be very useful. This isn't something that's talked about enough, but it's hard to have really high contact strength in a closed crimp, or even in a half crimp, you can kind of have it, but most people's contact strength tends to be much greater in an open hand, so either like a chisel or a front three drag. It tends to be a bit of preference and maybe morphology in which one you prefer. For me, I like front three drag. I think it is one of the most superior grips and arguably the most underrated. That's a rant for a different time though. But if you want to improve your contact strength, for a lot of people who are very strong crimpers or maybe really strong just in a half crimp because they've been told, hey, just half crimp on a hangboard forever and that'll cover everything. Oh man, just do some open-handed work. Your contact strength will improve so much better. We are so much better at latching quickly in an open-handed grip. Maybe you jump, latch a hold like that, put your feet back on the wall. Then we can kind of bounce it up into a half crimp or a full crimp from there. But that's a great physical training method to improve your contact strength without even having to directly train it, really. All right, so we've done mental, physical, next is technical. With technical, I talked about this a little bit already, but you have a start position. Are you in a good balanced start position, or as balanced as you can be? Are you going through the right path of travel from start position into end position? How are you moving up the wall, into the wall? Are you rotating as you go? All of these different things are very important. And then are you getting to the correct end position? Are you getting to a position to where you could actually physically latch this? Something I see all the time is people will say, I can get to the hold, but I just don't feel like I can latch it. But if you watch, they're exploding away from the wall. By the time they actually get to the hold, their body is so far from the wall that even if this was a handlebar jug, they would struggle to hold it. They're not actually getting to the correct end position. Another way of approaching your technique to improve this skill is a method I refer to as eyes on the prize, which is simply watching your hands and watching your feet all the way until they grab a hold or they step on a hold. This is a drill I prescribe to people all the time. It is kind of my answer to quiet feet. Quiet feet's been around forever and a lot of people do it, but so many people are like, yeah, it doesn't feel like it's giving back all that much. Like I do it, but okay, is it really helping me? The thing is, you can have really quiet feet without being accurate. You can also have really quiet feet without watching your hands all the way to the hold or watching your feet all the way to the hold. Quiet just means you were slow to get it there. And there is value in that. I don't think quiet feet is useless. I still do apply it sometimes in very specific situations. I think it can be a nice introduction to drill work and skill work for climbers, but I tend to abandon it pretty fast. So this idea of eyes on the prize It's very simple. You just, oh, I'm going to this crimp. I'm going to look at it before I go, and I'm going to keep my eyes on it all the way until my hand is fully on it and in control. And this sounds obvious. You're like, yeah, duh, Nate, of course, we all do this. No, you don't. And I don't even do it that well. And I have to teach it. And then people look at me, they're like, Nate, you're not really doing that thing. I'm like, yeah, I know. Don't stop calling it out. Comically, this is something that advanced climbers tend to really struggle with because we've gotten so good at getting our hand most of the way there. We know where the hold is. We don't have to keep looking. I know that this hold is right here. So we stop looking at the hold and we start looking for our next foothold. We do this all the time. Go watch people. We're all very bad at this, but if you watch some climbers, Adam Ondra amazingly, even with how fast he climbs, watches his hands and his feet to the holds every time. It's kind of remarkable that he's doing it with that speed, because when you try this, you'll feel like you're moving through molasses. It takes you an eternity to get to every single hold, but it improves your precision. And that is so important. Being able to hit a hold, especially a bad hold and at high speeds, hitting it well makes all the difference. So this is another technical way we can approach getting better at this skill of big moves to small holds. If we're looking at tactics for improving at this skill, we've got quite a few. First, rehearsing the move in isolation. If this is outside, maybe stack some crash pads you can pull on high. Try that move by itself rather than trying it from the ground every time. If it's something that requires a lot of coordination, a lot of power, it requires you to feel fresh to do it, yeah, let's try it by itself. We don't want to be trying it fatigued all of the time. Beyond that, we can make sure we're brushing holds, making sure they're not coated in chalk and all grimy. That's going to make holds feel better. Next is using tick marks, and I will do an entire video on tick marks because I believe that using tick marks can make you a technically more proficient climber if done correctly. They've been around forever. There are photos of Wolfgang Gulick doing the first ascent of Punks in the Gym, the world's first 514, and it has egregious tick marks on it. Like, we've been doing this forever. It works. It helps you with precision. Obviously, I'll go in detail in that video about, like, yes, brush your tick marks, make sure your tick marks are good, tons of things. I think a lot of people use tick marks but don't use them as effectively as they could, and because of that, they're more of an eyesore than a tactical tool. Other tactics we can use, a power spot. Oh, maybe one of the most underrated things out there. If you've got a partner who can help boost you through a move, maybe take 5, 10, 15 pounds off so that you can learn all of the mechanics of the move, but essentially at a slightly lighter weight. Amazing. I mean, that's perfect. That's what we want. It is criminal that we don't do this all of the time. And one more tactical method you can use for this is if you are training on a board or anything else that has a lot of holds, you can do smaller versions of this. You can use intermediates. Maybe if you're doing a giant pull through, let's go to the hold just below it a few times. Let's maybe use the hold a little bit higher. Do that. Let's do slightly bigger moves on better holds, smaller moves on smaller holds. We can keep iterating and doing all of these different versions to teach ourselves this skill, and that's a fantastic way to go. Very last pillar of mental, physical, technical, tactical, and strategic, strategy. So this is, maybe we want to wait until it's cold to try these big jump moves between small holds. If it's really hot, your skin might just be wet, and it doesn't matter how hard you try, how good your path of travel is, how great your contact strength is. If your skin's wet, you're in trouble. Also, I mean, and this one kind of falls back into tactics, but can you dry your skin out well? Do you know how to rest outside when it's freezing cold in a way that keeps your core temperature warm, but lets your skin cool off and get cold and hardened again so that you can jump to sharp crimps well? That's super important. Strategy could also be involved in what time of year are you going to train contact strength? This is something that maybe you don't want to train year round. It can be very high impact on your fingers. I mean, by definition, it's high impact on your fingers. Also, power, which this is a form of power, trains very quickly. It is something that we can develop pretty fast. So maybe you don't want to be training the most extreme amount of contact strength year round and kind of beating yourself up, if realistically we can work on a lot of these other physical attributes, and then as we get closer to a big trip or a performance season, then we can start ramping up the amount of contact strength work you do so that we're not getting more stress to our joints and connective tissues than we really need. All right, I know that was a lot, but that's kind of the point. The point is that there are so many ways to improve at something. This was literally just one skill of Can you get better at doing big moves between small holds? And I just listed, 20 different methods that you can be using to approach this weakness. There are so many ways to improve, and you don't have to do all of them. That's overwhelming. It was overwhelming just to talk through all of them. But if there are some that resonate with you, whether that is, oh, you know what, this is something I've done before and it kind of worked, but I abandoned it quickly, go back to it. If there is something where you say, I've never tried that, I've never even thought about it, yeah, go there. If it's something you've never tried before, ooh, that's a good place to go. If you've been climbing 10 plus years, new things can be really useful. I don't want you to feel like you need to do 50 new things every time you have a weakness. The whole point of this is mostly just to say, you have options. There are ways to improve. Let's try and find some. Let's keep digging around. Maybe don't believe this story you've told yourself of, I'm not strong on crimps. That's just who I am. I'm not good at them. Let's keep trying. Let's try more. Let's try better. All right, y'all. Last one for the day, number 83. Is now a good time to work on your weaknesses? And this is kind of a funny question because it's, hey, let's always be grinding. Let's get those weaknesses out of the way so we can keep getting better. That's how you improve. And I lived and died by that mentality of I want to work my weaknesses so I can keep getting better all the time. And boy, do I kind of regret it. I think there are times where you should lean into your strengths. So I'll give you a brief example. I used to live in the Red River Gorge. I had spent a ton of time building this great base of endurance. And then on back-to-back climbing days, I climbed 2 different 514s, really long endurance-based ones. My endurance was tremendous. And you know what? I had like another month left of season in the Red River Gorge of great weather. And my endurance was so good, I could have gone out and done so many good 513s, 13 pluses. Honestly, maybe even another 514. There were so many things I could have gone and done with that great base of endurance that I had spent a long time to develop. But in my mind, I thought, well, this shows me I've got good endurance. I want to have the other side of the spectrum now. I want to be more powerful. I want to be able to use really bad holds, do bouldery routes. And I spent the entire rest of my season climbing on these just short power routes because I needed to be working weaknesses. And man, that was a terrible idea. I was already going to be switching over to bouldering right after this season was over, a month from then. I really should have leveraged my strengths. And this is something that I know I'm particularly bad at, and I know quite a few people are. I find a lot of joy in finding the things I'm bad at and just really auguring in. How do I eliminate this weakness? I want to get better at this. This is where I find challenge, and this is where I find a lot of joy. But it has meant that throughout my climbing career, I've had moments where I've been very fit for specific things, and when I have felt like I have achieved the good enough status in this thing that maybe I used to be bad at, or just for whatever reason, I then decide, okay, let's move on. Let's go to something else that I'm bad at, rather than really taking the time to exploit that strength. Another time when it's not good to be working your weaknesses is if whatever you are doing is working right now. Look at me. If whatever you are doing is working right now, keep going. Don't stop doing this. This is such an iconic thing. This is a folly all of us will experience at some point. I mean, Dan John has a famous line of, it worked so well, I stopped doing it. And a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, well, that doesn't even make sense. And then a lot of people have this sad laugh. And they're like, yeah, been there. If what you are doing is working, keep going. You don't need novelty. You don't need anything new. Just keep going until it stops working. And make sure it's really stopped working. Not like, oh, I was having meteoric progress and now I'm just having good progress. Good progress is good. We take good progress in this house. Keep going. You will thank yourself. You would be amazed at how simple of methods so many people have found, and they just say, yeah, it works, and I kept going. And they'll see years and years of progress without having to make almost any change. There's this whole idea in strength and conditioning of, well, we need some form of novelty so you don't go stale. Here's the great thing. Rock climbing is novelty. Every boulder you do is different. Even if you are climbing on the tension board at 40 degrees every day, are you doing different boulders using different grips of different distances? Novelty. We don't lack novelty in climbing. I think this is one of those principles from training that totally makes sense, but is maybe over applied in climbing. you can just keep spamming the same thing for a long time and continue to see progress. Last one for is it a good time to work your weaknesses? Are you getting burnt out on working this weakness? If you're just kind of sick and tired of it, yeah, maybe give it a pause. If you feel like climbing above your bolt is hard for you, and you've spent months taking practice falls and just climbing scary things, a lot of slab vert, arrettes, just spooky climbing, and you're just like, hey man, I want to go climb some steep jugs where I just fall into space and don't touch the wall, and that sounds good to me. I'm kind of over this. I know I could get better, but it doesn't feel fun anymore. Yeah, step away. If you've really been grinding at it, you might have already gotten a lot better. But step away from it for a while. Wait until you kind of have some new motivation. And for that specific weakness, yeah, go climb other things that are more enjoyable. And then wait until this weakness shows its head again. Maybe you decide, oh, well, actually, there's this really hard route that has kind of a run out on it. I should try and get myself ready for this again. And you know what? All that work that you've put in, it doesn't disappear. Maybe it takes a few days to really get back in the groove, but you'll be so much better off than where you would have been had you not put in that initial work. And you'll actually feel excited about it now. It's not just another day of just taking terrifying whips and being like, oh God, why do I do this? Like, why am I coming out here? Is this fun? Is this just a habit? Is this my Sisyphean task? Just to roll this boulder up the hill, just to take a whip off of it? Yeah, rock climbing can be fun. I think hard work can be a lot of fun, and grinding and working on your weaknesses can be very enjoyable. But man, don't pummel yourself into the ground. Don't make yourself hate this sport just because you feel like working a weakness is important. All right, thanks for watching, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this big double episode all about weaknesses. If so, let me know. Also, if there are any specific aspects about climbing weaknesses, how to address them, how to find them, that you want to see covered, tell me about it down in the comments below. We've only got a few episodes left of the Advanced Climber series before we move on to the Elites, so I hope you'll join me for the rest of this series. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.